Over the past few years, Game of Thrones has firmly established itself as an icon in popular culture. With intimate stories guiding an imaginative world of fantasy and adventure, George R.R. Martin's book series A Song of Ice and Fire, adapted into the television series Game of Thrones, will surely be remembered as a timeless classic, influencing the future of storytelling for years to come. However, despite the grandiose inspirational achievements Game of Thrones has accomplished in its tenure, there are certainly a myriad of dark, unforgiving, and haunting moments the series has produced as well. And today, I'm highlighting some of the most controversial and horrifying scenes the series has ever explored to find out what is the darkest moment in Game of Thrones.
The yes is just the crest, expressing myself the best. The recipe for death is testing me. I'm the next to be, pressing heavy heat up on your chest until you rest in peace. Let the lesson be, don't mess with me unless you want your dome piece blown into the Chesapeake.
Obviously, if you're caught up with the most recent season of the show, you know that there is certainly no shortage of potentially traumatizing scenes. From betrayal, disease, and bigotry to rape, murder, and torture, there's definitely many terrible atrocities to choose from. However, I first want to discuss a scene deserving of a mention simply for its gratuity and violence. While many, if not all of the scenes that I'll go over later in this video are thematically deep, this scene's appearance is mostly due to its harsh and unforgiving brutality. I'm sure many of you can already guess what scene I'm referring to. The Oberyn fight.
You raped her! You murdered her! You killed her children! Say it!
Elia Martell, I killed her children. That I raped her. That I smashed her head in like this.
As one of the most memorable action set pieces the series has to offer, the duel between Oberyn Martell and the Mountain lands itself in this video for its execution and unpredictability. Ever since his introduction, Oberyn had stood apart from many of the other characters. The show expertly introduces Oberyn as an undisputed badass who isn't afraid to take on any challenge. As we learn more about his motivation and reasoning for traveling to King's Landing, a place which he despises and heavily looks down upon, we begin rooting for him. The juxtaposition Oberyn's vengeance has with Tyrion's predicament of being accused of killing King Joffrey misleads the audience into believing Oberyn will undoubtedly stand victorious in the fight, despite the seemingly insurmountable difference in size between him and a character so fittingly named the Mountain. We, the audience, foolishly believe this to be a stereotypical underdog story in which Oberyn will somehow overcome the Mountain's immense strength with speed and agility, but, as we regretfully know, this is not what happens. Despite Oberyn's radiant confidence in the face of a Goliath, he fails. But not only does he fail, he is utterly decimated, physically obliterated. His blinding desire for revenge on the man who slaughtered his sister and her children makes him lose sight of the task at hand, where he carelessly wanders too closely to the deceptively still Mountain. In a moment which I will never forget, the Mountain swiftly knocks Oberyn to the ground before immediately mounting him as he proceeds to gouge out his eyes and quite literally pop his head. This scene shocked me so much as one of the most badass characters the show had ever seen went out so unceremoniously. In the blink of an eye, the person most audience members had been rooting for died in quite gruesome fashion. We were now left to wonder whether Tyrion would soon face a similar fate for his wrongful accusation of regicide, which only exacerbates just how dreadful this moment was. Moving on from the simple and instinctively gut-wrenching effects of over-the-top violence and gore, I now want to shed some light on some of the more thematically complex scenes that require a greater amount of analysis and attention to detail to fully understand their corruptive and twisted nature. Game of Thrones certainly has plenty of these scenes as well. Scenes that not only showcase the brutal physical realities of humanity and what people can do when overcome with powerful emotions like fear, greed, and lust, but also scenes that use such potent physical displays of these events to portray the human psyche hidden within. Now, I know that may sound complicated, but to help explain more clearly what I mean, let's look at the controversial depiction of Sansa's rape.
Take off your clothes. You stay here, Rick. I told you to watch.
We all know how despicable Ramsay Bolton was. More than any other character, Ramsay's personality, his story, his essence, his very being revolved around violence and gratuity, taking whatever he wanted by force and without hesitation. So when he marries Sansa, we know all too well how dire her situation has become. Forced to marry a man who takes pleasure in pillaging, torturing, and flaying other people, Sansa will now have to overcome something even worse than Joffrey. What makes this scene even worse is Sansa's recent troubled history since the show's earlier seasons. She hasn't had much happiness since the first few episodes, and after falling into Ramsay's clutches, she will only face even harder circumstances. After apprehensively marrying Ramsay, Sansa hopes that she won't have to actually have sex with someone so revolting, even though she had only known him for a few episodes up to this point. Perhaps due to Tyrion's kindness and unwillingness to force himself onto her, Sansa naively believes that Ramsay might do the same, but he doesn't. Instead, Ramsay aggressively and without hesitation tears off Sansa's clothes and viciously rapes her. Although the audience doesn't clearly see what is happening, we can gauge how revolted and disgusted Sansa appears about Ramsay's actions and how tormented and violated she feels. This scene showcases the cold brutality of sexual assault and the helplessness people can feel when overwhelmed by someone who holds all of the power. No matter what she did, he was in control and he painstakingly took advantage of his position over her to wrongfully do whatever he wished, whether she wanted to or not. Continuing with everyone's favorite character, I now want to transition into a bit of a miniature character dissection of Ramsay Bolton and some of his escapades as he gains favor with his father and ultimately becomes legitimized. Of course, Ramsay's torture of Theon has to be mentioned in a video discussing the darkest moments in Game of Thrones history, as the sheer brutality and horror Ramsay inflicted upon Theon still has an impact in the current season, even after Ramsay's death.
No mercy, please! Please, mercy!
I'm not killing you, just making a few alterations.
No! 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 Please, no!
There's plenty to dive into regarding Theon's torture and dehumanization. We see Theon go from a confident, bordering on arrogant human being to someone so cowardly and timid that he is virtually unrecognizable. Ramsay's unyielding torment of Theon not only physically crippled him, but mentally as well. To see someone forced to refer to himself as Reek for the putrid smell he gives off due to the horrendous conditions in which he finds himself is sad. Theon tries to hold out as long as he can, holding firmly to his self-image as Theon Greyjoy, but after being castrated and lacerated repeatedly, he can no longer maintain his own identity. There are many moments that remind the audience that Theon is no longer the man he once was, but is now a cowering shadow of his former self. Even after seeing his sister attempt to rescue him, he cannot bring himself to attempt an escape for fear that it's simply a trap designed to cause him further pain and punishment. Several other scenes showcase exactly what I'm referring to in that Theon Greyjoy no longer exists, and every time we see one of those events, our sympathy towards Theon grows even more as we realize he may not have deserved the hellacious treatment he received. Another scene that presents Ramsay's demented and cruel personality is the feeding of his baby brother to his dogs.
Follow me, mother.
Where is Lord Bolton? Ramsay, please. I'll leave Winterfell. I'll go back to the Riverlands. He's your brother.
I prefer being an only child.
While Ramsay had committed some truly deplorable acts, this is perhaps the most unforgivable. Although it didn't have much bearing in the series' overall narrative, it showed just how relentless Ramsay Bolton could be. Seeing someone evil enough to kill a newborn baby is perhaps the darkest moment that the show has to offer, because while many other scenes may have more gruesome violence, this scene displays the harrowing lengths some people will go to secure their position and maintain power. The next scene I wanted to discuss is one of the most surprising scenes in the show, but also one of the most representative of the show's central themes, encapsulating everything the show had been leading up to: the Red Wedding.
My king has married, and I owe my new queen a wedding gift.
Please!
The Lannisters send their regards.
Now, as one of the most infamous scenes in the show, the Red Wedding has been dissected many times, but I still think it was worth mentioning in this video because it truly is one of the darkest moments the series has to offer for several reasons. Firstly, we see in a surprising moment that war in Game of Thrones is sometimes fought through betrayal and backstabbing more than swords and arrows. Although Robb had gone back on his word to marry Walder Frey's daughter, we were still rooting for him, and up to this point, Robb had appeared to have everything under control for the most part. The Starks had been slighted by several other families many times, so the audience foolishly believed that they had to be approaching some sort of horizon. Robb had just married and was expecting a child, and although he had lost the Karstarks from his army, we believed he could gain the support of the Freys even though he had gone back on his word. But we were wrong. Tywin had other plans. In perhaps the series' most memorable scene, Robb's quest to King's Landing to get revenge for his father comes to an abrupt stop. The Freys and the Boltons betray the Starks and kill everyone at the wedding. The way this scene so harshly goes from exuberance to claustrophobia as the doors close and Catelyn notices the chainmail on Roose Bolton's arm is masterfully done, sparking an emotional roller coaster. As the bodies begin dropping and Robb's newlywed pregnant wife is slaughtered, we know that the series has seen a dramatic turn. As a result of this dark and traumatic event, the Red Wedding creates so many motivations for other characters in the show, it makes for one of the most important scenes in Game of Thrones history. The final scene I'm going to mention involves many of the show's central themes of betrayal, trust, and lust for power. The scene I'm referring to is, of course, the Princess Shireen's death.
Where's my father? I want to see my father!
It will all be over soon, Princess.
Please, let me see my father! Father, where are you? Don't let her do this! Please,
Lord of Light, protect us!
Please, Father!
For the night is dark and full of terrors!
Father, please! Help! Help! Please don't do this, Father!
Now, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that many people think that this is the darkest scene in the show, as even the show itself seems to have some understanding of this crime's severity. Shireen's death hauntingly and completely reveals the lengths Stannis will go to secure his throne. His blind faith in Melisandre leads him to doing the unthinkable, something so cold and evil that even his wife, the woman who had initially held unyielding faith in the Red God and an apparent disdain or dissatisfaction with her daughter Shireen, couldn't bear to go through with it. So much so that she hanged herself after witnessing the brutal, heartbreaking death of her only living child. Before Shireen's death, though, Stannis had been presented as a cold man with a singular mind who was willing to do whatever it took to seize the throne, but he always felt just. He never seemed to particularly enjoy killing or fighting, but would do so if necessary. But ever since we were first introduced to Shireen, Stannis always showed great love for her despite the grayscale covering her face. So when we see Stannis shamefully walk out of the crowd of soldiers to witness his own daughters burning, the scene becomes unbearably emotional. We see a man so desperate and hungry for power that he betrays the person he loved the most, the person who had loved him more than anything and trusted him to protect her. As we see him slowly approach, we hope that he'll stop such a dreadful act as we hear Shireen's haunting screams as she is violently burned alive. Seeing Stannis and the soldiers so calm and melancholy about the situation adds to its somber tone, but when Shireen's mother refuses to stand silently as her daughter burns, rejecting the Red Priest's ideas which she had previously so ardently believed, we can't help but feel overcome with sadness as one of the most innocent people in the entire series is torturously burned alive while hundreds of soldiers watch without a word or objection. Culminating this somber, cold, and hopeless atmosphere, we see Shireen's mother hang herself, overcome with the guilt of killing her only living child as Stannis looks on. What may be the most upsetting part of the entire scene is that Stannis shows little emotion towards this entire event. Although he allowed all of this to happen, he must have felt horribly about what he did, but he couldn't show it. Even after everything that had happened, after everything and everyone he had lost, Stannis still only sought the throne, no matter what he had to do to achieve it. He had wrongfully put his faith into Melisandre's hands, but she had left him without a word, leaving him to his own morbid fate and betraying everything he had stood for, even after decimating everything he had loved. Now, I'm sure you've been clamoring for me to mention at least one or two more scenes that you adamantly believed had to make an appearance for one reason or another. I know that I've definitely missed at least a few of the darkest scenes Game of Thrones has to offer, and with the upcoming final Season 8 always approaching, I'm sure this video will leave out some of the most horrendous and disgusting scenes that have yet to be released. I didn't feel as though scenes like the hanging of the Night's Watch traitors, Daenerys killing Khal Drogo, and the suicide of King Tommen Baratheon were dark enough to merit an in-depth discussion in this video, but it doesn't change just how deplorable those scenes were. This video wasn't meant to analyze every explicit or vile event in the show though. I just wanted to spark a conversation on some of the most disturbing moments in Game of Thrones and offer a short analysis for each one. Alright, that's the video. I appreciate you for sticking around this long. If you liked the video and you want to see more, please feel free to subscribe and comment what you want me to cover next. Go ahead and check my channel for some more cool videos as well. I'm sure I've got something you'll be interested in. I'm getting better every day, and I've got more great stuff coming on the way. Stay tuned.
A game's played better once than when played twice. Unless you get another chance and regain life. To climb the ladder you'll need more than a friend, but I'ma say it's over when you're distorted and skinned.